combination work session and public hearing for the planning board for the village of Southampton, New York. Can I get a motion to open the meeting, please?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
What was it like to?
Okay, great. We have a couple of housekeeping things to deal with before we get into,
Mr. Chairman, even before we get to, I do just have one question. I know there's a stenographer here. I don't think this is a person hired by the village. So if you could just identify yourself,
Sure, Wayne Galante?
and you're hired by, not the village, I assume?
No, local and
Okay, just so long as I'm sure you're aware that you're bound by the same rules as everybody else here. I just wasn't sure who you were.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
this is the
Sorry
first
about
for me, is it okay, has this ever,
Many times.
He's not precluded from being here. I just wanted to be sure he knew who he was.
thank you.
I checked with village council to just confirm he wasn't hired by the village. And as long as he knows he's bound by the same rules as everybody else and doesn't interrupt in any other way.
Okay,
I think that's
So what I was, just wanted to be certified, short-handed for nexus. Thank you.
thanks.
I can assure you that you'll abide by any rules.
okay.
I just want to skip quickly to subdivision review, Heavy Creek LLC lot line modification. The attorney for this application has requested an adjournment, so to April 3rd. And while I brought up the April 3rd issue, it's come to my attention that the National Planning Board Conference is on April 3rd, and our consultants will not be available for that meeting. So we're going to have to cancel that meeting and resume regular business at the April 17th meeting. So can I get, I'd like to move that we accept the adjournment to April 17th, and we'll let Linda know. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
And 51 Pond Lane, Town of Southampton, again, this application is sort of in a holding pattern at this point. So we don't really have to move on anything, I just want to acknowledge it, that we haven't heard from the applicant in a while, and there are some developments that we're waiting for. Okay, so let's get down to the public hearing for 554 Hill Street LP. And I'd like to note that we've had recent submissions on this application, some as early as 2 p.m. today. So I haven't had time to look at the one from 2 p.m. today, and I don't think we've had enough time to look at the ones from Friday for our consultants and our attorney. I just wanted to make you aware of that, because we're most likely going to have to leave this public hearing open at the end of the night, so that we have time.
I'll have a request that's germane to that.
Okay.
Responsive to that, but I understand exactly what you're saying, Chairman.
Thank you. So,
My name is John Bennett, and I'm a lawyer from Bennett and Reed. With me is my partner, as well as Bailey Larkin, who's another lawyer at the firm. And we're here this evening on the public hearing on 550 Hill Street, 554 Hill Street, and 62 Captain's Neck Lane. The Zoning Board of Appeals created these lots, gave all the relief necessary for 2 of the lots not to have any fee simple street frontage. With one of the lots having a driveway off of 62 Captain's Neck Lane. Full relief was granted. This is very common when you grant relief for lots that don't have fee simple access, but they have perfectly fine access. The Zoning Board of Appeals created the zoning for the area. I've given you that many times in unequivocal authority. And that for you essentially to work out some of the things that they said they wanted you to work out. They also said to the Architectural Review Board, go and make sure that that house that was on one of the existing lots can come down. We went to the zoning board, I went to the Architectural Review Board. It was hotly contested, and that was one of your conditions that we had to meet to the sketch plan approval. So we went to the Architectural Review Board, and by a 3-2 vote, the architectural review board said take the house down, because they found it had absolutely zero historic significance. Interestingly enough, some of the objectors that were relying on information from the property to the east, which I pointed out was not the same property. That was never challenged. So that was one of the conditions that this board asked us to go through to get to where we are now, which is the final application. So again, all the relief necessary for the creation of these lots, two of them having no street frontage, having driveway and easement frontage, is a very common thing in the village and the town. I gave many examples of that. That's done, and that was affirmed by the court. So what you're seeing with the objectors' arguments are nothing but a recitation and a constant repetition of decisions that have already been made and have been litigated and affirmed. And I can only think that it's some sort of sideshow, hoping that some lay people on the board will mistakenly find interest in what are absolutely legally affirmed arguments. The stated position of the village in the court is that this method is not only appropriate, but was legal. I really have to scratch my head. Not only is it legal, but they argue this. This is the decision of Sanford Berlin in the Supreme Court, Suffolk County, and one of their arguments was the ZBA improperly approved two landlocked lots by approving street access for lot 2 and 3 that relied on establishing an illegal accessory use of adjoining property. This has been heard, and the arguments have been considered by the Supreme Court, and they've been denied. That's all there is to it. So you're going to
Isn't that under appeal though?
That's the law now.
No, okay.
That's the law now. And I don't want to jinx, it's very, it's risky to rely on comments that the appellate happened during the appellate division argument. But at one point, when my adversary was saying the zoning board of appeals was acting as a legislature and rezoning the property, one of the appellate division justices literally leaned over and said, "What do you think zoning boards do?" Okay, remember you have three uses here: one non-conforming, two conforming, three uses: a house, a 240-foot-long pre-existing non-conforming light industrial use, and you're going to three uses, all of them conforming. All not on the same size lots, but another thing that the appellate division judge was literally read through the zoning board of appeals decision, talking about all the surrounding lots. So I'm pretty much going to leave it with all of these arguments about it's a structure, it can't be there, it's an illegal way to gain access through the lot. You're going to hear that again and again and again and again and again and again and again tonight, but I'm not going to refute it because I've refuted it already. It's been argued and answered and refuted and denied by the courts. And that is, by the way, the legal position of the village of Southampton. Not only the court said that, but that's the legal position of the village of Southampton. So you'll hear a lot about that tonight. I'm not going to bring it up again because it's just the same old wine in different bottles. That's all there is to it. I would think that you'd be tired of it, that argument, as I am. In any event, even assuming there was some validity to those arguments, they weren't raised before the zoning board of appeals. It's up to the zoning board of appeals to decide whether or not a lot can have access without fee. They did. It's up to them. That's what they did. I've never seen anybody in 40 years of doing this, including litigating, making an argument that because, which is what one of the adversaries says, because we didn't raise it below, we can raise it now. This has been like almost a joke amongst the local bar. If you don't raise something below, and it's incumbent upon you to do it, that doesn't mean you preserved it. You've lost it, period, end of story. And the objectants have only themselves to blame for that. So again, let's move this along and stop arguing over things that have already been decided. So again, the applicant is seeking approval to create 3 lots from 2 existing properties. The subdivision has an exceedingly long history before this board. The initial application was filed 11 years ago. 11 years ago. Ms. Eisman's firm and I worked on a subdivision of 56 lots that was approved about 15 years ago. It took 4 years. 4 years. I'm creating 3 lots where there were 2. It's been 11 years. Dimensional relief was granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2017. Seeker was gone through, and there's been no change, as your own consultant has told you, there's no change anywhere near what would be required to change or re-look at seeker. The suggestion that changes in a driveway drainage would give rise to a new seeker review is absurd. It's laughable. Do you know what a positive declaration is? A type 1 action? Seeker is one of the most abused laws by objectants. If you look at the seeker regulations, you know what a type 1 action is, which is an action which is likely to have a significant environmental impact. 50 homes which are not hooked up to both wastewater systems and public water. That's the sort of things that properly deserve environmental review. You had environmental review here, there's nothing changed. A resolution granting sketch plan approval was adopted by this board on July 2nd, 2018. Alan, I have to be honest with you, I looked at the video and you said, I beg to differ. There's really nothing to differ about. There was a resolution that was adopted by this board granting sketch plan approval on July 2nd, 2018. That's the law. That's what's in the record. An Article 78 proceeding was filed in an attempt to overturn the approval of the ZBA. By decision dated October 26, 2017, Berlin upheld the ZBA approval. An appeal was filed with the appellate division. So what? The law is what it is now, and you have to act on that law. If I'm a gambling man, I'm saying that the pretty good odds that the appellate division, based upon the oral argument, is simply going to affirm. But again, as it stands now, the law before you is what the Supreme Court said. I want to briefly note a footnote from the village's own brief, the own brief that was filed, and what the village has done, both in the Zoning Board of Appeals and in their positions at law. You're going to hear complaining from the applicants, but to a certain degree, really ties your hands. The record of the ZBA and the Planning Board set forth in the certified return contained 250 separate entries consisting of correspondence, reports, maps, plans, as well as minutes of 62 separate ZBA meetings, full transcripts of 9 of the ZBA meetings, minutes of 79 separate planning board meetings, and the full transcripts of 16 of the planning board meetings. Now, that means it occurred in the minutes for the ZBA 62 times. That doesn't mean it was 62 hearings. It means, there were adjournments, et cetera, et cetera. The same with the planning board. 79 times it appeared in the minutes. There were 9 ZBA hearings, 16 planning board meetings. This is based, what is this? This is when the village filed their brief 2 years ago, and it's continued to go on and on. And a final subdivision application was filed with this board on December 23rd, 2021, after multiple work sessions held on February 28th, 2022, September 19th, 2022, October 17th, 2022, December 19th, 2022, a public hearing was scheduled for February 6th, 2023. On February 6th, 2023, this board had the opportunity to hear from the opposition, and afford the opposition the opportunity to submit their objections in writing. They have done so. We have responded in writing. We are in receipt of the most recent memorandum issued by Nestle Pope and Voorhees, dated March 17th, 2023. I'm going to ask Vincent Gaudiello, who's prepared a written response to the comments raised in this memo. Mr. Gaudiello is an engineer, works with Rayner Group, is a principal of Rayner Group. He's also, he'll tell you, the village engineer for various municipalities. I've worked for Mr. Gaudiello. I had the absolute pleasure to work with Mr. Gaudiello for 30 years, and his firm before that. He's generally seen as the gold standard for engineering on the East End. So I'm gonna ask Mr. Goriello to come up and briefly summarize his correspondence with the board, and then I'm gonna have a few more things to say, and then I'll get out of your hair. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Vincent Goriello. I'm a professional engineer with the Rayner Group, and I've been involved with this project probably since 2018. We did get the comments from the village engineer Friday afternoon late. I went over them over the weekend, and I did prepare a written response,
Which we've submitted.
which we have submitted and et cetera. What's interesting about the subdivision standards when it comes to drainage in the village of Southampton is that criteria is really not in the code. It basically says that you should provide drainage as required by the village engineer. Unlike the town of Southampton, or the village of Quogue, or the village of East Hampton, or the town of Riverhead, that basically are gonna say, hey, listen, you're gonna use this storm vent, you're gonna use these runoff coefficients. And basically, in the instance of the village of Southampton, it's your engineer that basically tells us what we should be using. There's one other drainage criteria that we need to comply with, and that's the Speedies general permit. Because we are disturbing the New York State Speedies general permit for construction activity. Because we are disturbing more than 1 acre, we need a SWIP for this project. And actually what we needed is a full SWIP as opposed to a partial SWIP. And a full SWIP basically identifies stormwater calculations. How much volume of storage we need to put on a site. Based on our current design, with respect to the criteria, I'll speak further about the village's requirements and what has gone back and forth with Nelson and Pope, but based solely on the Speedies general permit criteria, their calculations, inputting our data into that, we are nearly 3 times the volume provided when it comes to water quality, and about 50% more when it comes to channel protection. And I just bring that up to this board as a barometer as where we sit with that design criteria. And again, I don't know if Nelson and Pope has not, I assume, has not had a chance to review my response yet, and I don't intend for.
So this is the response that was submitted at 2:00 this afternoon?
Exactly.
Oh.
No.
But the point I want to make to this board is, currently, we far exceed that criteria. And through the course of the design with this project, we started out with a 2-inch rainfall event. We went up to a 5-inch rainfall event. It came back down to a 3 based on my professional judgment, because in essence, what we were doing now was, besides dealing with the water that was solely on our property, we took into account everything that was off-site, everything that could potentially come down here to this area.
Didn't it go to 1 at one point too?
No, it would never went to 1. What, in essence, from a drainage calculation, you're gonna take a rainfall event, you're gonna use a runoff coefficient, so an impervious surface, 100% of the water runs off, as opposed to landscape areas which vary anywhere from 0.1 to 0.3, 0.4, depending on what the topography is, soil types, etc. We have great soil types here. Just to kind of summarize what I have said in my letter here.
If you would, I think what we're talking about, were the runoff coefficients modified along the way? I think that's what
They-
it was a point out. So
well,
you could just explain.
The runoff coefficients were, however, the impervious, the 100%, always remained that way. But again, I just want to make the point here is that with respect to the coefficients, etc., nothing is codified. And with respect to what would be required of us for this project, I would tell Nelson and Pope, tell us what the coefficients are. Tell us what storm event you want. And what we've done in this last submission is, we used a 5-inch rainfall event, we used a 0.25 on the landscaping, and we've demonstrated to you that we can fit the drainage in the areas where we are currently proposing. Now, let me just give you some background, and I don't mean to tout.
Can I just interrupt, on what plan did you have 0.25 as the impervious coefficient?
On what plan?
You just said 5-inch rainfall
We-
event and
With
0.25?
our submission today,
With your submission today, okay,
I
thank you.
provided 2 sketches.
Okay,
Because what I wanted the board, I wanted to confirm to the board, should you wish us to use 5 inches and a 1-inch coefficient and a 0.25 for landscaping, which in my professional opinion is extremely overkill. And I base that on the fact that my firm, including myself primarily, serve as the town of Riverhead Planning Board engineer, the village of Quab, the village of East Hampton, the village of North Haven, the town of Shelter Island. I've been at this for a lot of times. I review Nelson Pope's work, I review H2M's work. And I would like to think that I've been fair and appropriate and a professional. But at this juncture, and I'm somewhat exhausted, and I don't mean to show frustration, but this is, drainage is not the reason that you guys should be contemplating why you don't like this or not. We've killed the drainage. You can't put enough dry wells in the ground for the amount of common driveway that's here. I'm sorry, you can't. So with that, I just, if you have any questions of me, if there is questions after you get an opportunity to read what I presented. If Nelson Pope has any questions, I would encourage what they, I'd love to have a sit down with you guys and tell me exactly what you want to do.
so just for clarity, I'm not the engineer, I'm from
I-
Nelson Pope Voorhees,
I know.
but yeah, we'll be reviewing it, obviously. And Scott Reisinger is on Zoom and listening in.
And listen, as last time when,
Let him finish, please. Let him finish, please.
the last time when we were on here, I believe several months ago, and we submitted a design, I believe, I apologize for his last name, Reisinger?
Reisinger.
I thought we were pretty much on the same page. With that said,
Well, he was. He made a statement which is on the record that he was satisfied with it.
so,
But I think there was a question from our board members.
Yeah, I did. I had a question because it was raised in some of the submissions that the driveway is not to grade, and I just wanted to understand for my own edification, how much not to grade is the driveway that's proposed, and what does that mean in terms of considering this a structure or just a regular driveway in terms of how we look at the proposed access for the shared driveway?
It's all, John Bennett, it's all shown
There's a
on,
profile on the plan.
there's a profile on the plan, and in terms of the other ancillary questions which you asked, they're irrelevant, and I'm not gonna respond to them.
Well, actually, but I don't think that they're relevant, because the question was, what was the change from existing grade? And if you can't
And there's
answer
a
that,
profile
and if
on the
you can't
plan.
answer that, and
Yes.
if you can't answer that,
Yes.
perhaps the engineer would.
He said there's a profile on the plan. But
Yeah,
if-
I asked
just
the
finish
engineer
the
because
statement
as
you're
we
making,
mentioned
I
before, we're
appreciate
lay
it.
people, and I would like to understand, I'm a lay person with respect to that, not
No, you're a member of the bar.
Yes, I'm a member of the board.
You told me many times you're a
But
member
the,
of the bar.
but the question
I
is,
am a member of the board, and I'd
Question.
like to understand that, and I don't understand your position that you're not answering it, but that's been your position with many of the.
Of your questions, yes.
but here's the
Yeah,
question, here's the
As a
question.
board member, I have to raise issues that pertain to the village code, and I think you as the attorney have to.
They have to be germane to your jurisdiction.
Here's the question.
But I'll ask the.
Here's the question that,
Sorry.
if I could,
Yeah, of course.
you have the engineer here,
Yes.
okay, and either your engineer or the other engineer, I understand there's a profile submitted,
Yes.
I think we all have it, if perhaps the engineer can go through and just discuss, when we look at the profile, if you take the existing grade, and I recognize what you're talking about, but just describe the changes that occur in the proposed driveway. So what's the difference from grade as it exists, does it go down, does it go up? If you could talk us through, I think that would be helpful.
I will do that, and I will have him explain the physical changes,
Thank you.
but I am not, let me finish, I am not gonna have him respond to any attempt to legally characterize this. He is going to testify in front of you as a fact witness, and what's happening is you have one board member who's carrying a lot of water for the opposition, who's trying to buttress the opposition's position from a legal point of view. And as I've said, on many occasions, it's all irrelevant, it's been decided regardless of any
Yeah,
changes
that's
in grade.
totally spurious, and I
Okay,
just think
all right,
it
well,
not make things.
we'll figure that out sometime, maybe in another venue.
Mr. Bennett, I'm gonna ask,
Yes.
and I think it helps not just the board here, but the person who's taking notes for you.
Yes.
If more than one person talks, everybody's not gonna hear it, so just let me finish.
Okay.
Your characterizations are your characterizations, the board will make their own legal determinations.
course.
I think the question was, and I think it would be helpful, if your engineer can just talk through whether factually, sure, let him describe the changes, that would be greatly appreciated.
That's true, and he will do that, he will talk about it factually, but he's not going to respond to any questions which attempt to make him characterize this in one way, legally or another. Just not
That's
there,
gonna
I'm
be the
gonna
board's
address it, not-
determination to make.
Okay, thank you.
And sir, if you could do me a favor, just identify which plan you're looking at so that we can now find it. You know, is this the one you submitted today, or?
No, this has been in front of you for a while.
Okay.
On drawing number C-2, last dated 3/17/2023, it says driveway plan and details. There are two insets on the top of the page.
Is the camera on?
Is the camera on? Is the camera working?
It was at the ARB.
Actually, but it's not right.
I just wanna make sure that we're.
And so you said 317 C2?
C2. You've got 301, that's the one. But you know what, those profiles didn't. So in each detail here, below it is a profile. And what's shown on that profile is what existing grade is.
That's the dotted line,
That's the
the fine dotted line.
yes, and what proposed grade is. And based on the driveway, I'll call it for lots 1 and 2, in essence, that driveway follows existing grade. And I'll term it that way from a standpoint of design. It basically what you're seeing as far as existing grade and what proposed grade is, it's within inches. If you look at the profile for the driveway that would serve lot 3, again, the same plan represents what the existing gradage, which is the finer, and then the proposed grade is darker.
Can we ask this colloquy between these folks, should they take it outside or try not to interrupt while we're presenting?
I was so focused on this, I didn't even hear it.
I'm
Sorry.
hearing it.
Oh. So there's gonna be some cutting and filling going on.
Exactly, and it's a balance excavation. I mean, in essence, what we're doing with that design is we are creating a low point to capture the water, and in essence, you know, with respect to how that grades out, you know, it's what I would find to be, you know, within common practices.
But just factually, what are the, in terms of measurements for existing?
Well, it varies, it's tough, I mean, that's why you create these profiles, is to say, you know, in certain instances, it's at the same elevation. In certain instances, it's a cut, of maybe, I wanna say the max cut is probably 2, and that the max fill is probably 2. So it varies. But again, that's why you do the profiles. All, again, the village code with respect to design profile, et cetera, it's, you know, you're not given a lot. All these design grades and the way that they come into each other have been generated through standard engineering practices, local codes, you know, governing criteria that this area is accustomed to.
And when you say two, what is two? What's the measurement?
It's 2 feet.
2 feet.
I can read this because I do this for a living. It's a cut and fill exercise basically, but
And again, you know, so typically speaking, you know, we try to, like, you look at the first driveway, you follow existing grade. The grade through the other driveway, obviously, you're not gonna build a driveway on some of those existing, the way that the transition, just, you know, it would go up and down. But again, just as far as that proposed grade, if you go into plan view, we also provide a grading plan that shows how these new grades will transition into the existing grades that exist on the property. So all that has been engineered, it's all on the plans.
and if I'm reading this correctly, there's a 3-foot grade change overall. From 21.5 to 24.5, right?
21 to 24, right.
From the,
Good. So there's a, why isn't that coming up? 1, 2. No, the max fill is 2 feet.
no, the grade change from one end to the other is about,
The entire run?
yeah.
It's no different than a lot of existing grade profiles.
It's not flat driveway, I'm not.
No, I just wanna make sure
So,
I'm
so,
understanding this.
so, proposed grade at the easterly end would be roughly 24.5.
Mhm.
And that where you meet the street, where it would meet the
It's
street
21.5.
as 22.
So that's a 3-foot grade change.
And you have the
22.
midsection as being 20.5, basically.
And actually it goes down and it comes up.
It dips and comes up.
Correct.
Just my final question on that is the grade change as opposed to lots 1 and 2, the necessity has to do with the catching the water at the.
Yeah,
low point in the middle,
properly
is that
managing the
issue?
stormwater. And again,
Okay,
just,
that's the
and just so
question
you
now,
know
but
that
the grade
this,
change has to do, it's different from 1 and 2 because you need to catch stormwater, is that,
you
that's
know,
the question?
basically you need to properly grade the driveway
That's where the catch basin will go. It's on the diagram.
at the low, exactly.
Okay.
And I just wanna point to this board that these profiles, this grading design has been reviewed by your village engineer. And I'll say no objections have been taken, which we would assume are acceptable.
Well, that's what was on the video.
Yep.
Quick question, and I apologize, because I am also a lay person,
Yeah.
but I have some experience reading these. So I understand the grade change from east to west. How do you manage the grade change from north to south?
Well, that was my point earlier. If you go to our plan view, which is on a different sheet, we show proposed grades, contours that are outside the driveway, and how that grade is going to transition into, okay. If you look in the plan on the same drawing, if I can just find points. So, right here, that's your proposed contour, 22, 22, 24. So basically, this is what your grading activity is going to be, basically, if you're looking at plan view as opposed to a cut through the driveway. So we have a retaining wall here, so this is how we tie into this. And as well along the southerly boundary of the
So
property.
this is the north end and this is the south end?
Correct.
Okay.
So, Chairman, may I just ask a question for clarification? So, one of the questions that came up, and Mr. Bennett, if you're able to respond, or the engineer, I think that one of the questions that was raised, so I expect will be discussed tonight, is in the code, structures defined as anything constructed or erected or on or under the ground or upon another structure or building, excluding driveways constructed at a natural grade. So I think the question was explaining how that is natural grade.
It is what it is, that's our response. If you wanna make some sort of legal characterization, which we think has already been decided, that's up to you, that's up to the board, that's anyone else to make. But that's our
I just
response.
wanted to ask.
That's our response.
That's your response.
Yeah, I'm of the professional opinion that these driveways have been designed both from a grading and drainage standpoint in accordance with common practices, code acceptable standards, and the way we do things around here.
Okay, so can we hear from the public now?
I'm not quite finished.
Well, you kind of finished, you
No,
said
no,
you're.
I haven't. I
Well,
said I had no.
You're taking your house and going home,
I
is what you
understand.
just told us.
Anthony, I said I have just about a minute to finish up, I will, I promise you.
Well, then you better answer our questions in the
Excuse
future.
me?
Answer our questions in the future
Okay.
without the attitude.
I don't have an attitude, I don't, I seriously don't, I don't, I'm responding as my professional responsibility requires me to. So, in any event, and I'll be quick. At this time, I'm going to ask the board to close the public hearing, for written submission only. We have provided all that we think is legally and professionally and customarily necessary. If the Nelson Pope and their engineers wanted to give us, as a condition to final approval, some different coefficient, as often handled in conditions to final approval, that's usually crossing the T's and dotting the I's. We will certainly do that. But we're, at this point, we're done submitting any further information to this board. We think we've more than adequately complied with all the requests. And again, if this board and your consultants have any changes that they want to make, those can easily be taken care of by final conditional approval conditions. We're really down to the short strokes right now. So, we don't have anything else to submit. We'd ask you to close for written submission only. We understand that you just got some of these things. We tried to get, you gave us a schedule. We tried to adhere to that schedule, then it seems to have fallen apart by everybody. So we understand that you need some more time, but we're not going to submit anything else. We're not saying we won't make any changes, but what we're saying at this point, given my 40 years of practice before this board, 40 years in the village, planning board, ARB, and zoning board of appeals, what you do at this point, when we're down to this point, is you put any changes that you want, if you want them. We don't think there's any engineering changes need to be made, if you want them, and they're reasonable, put them in a conditional final approval, and we'll make the changes. That's it.
John, can I ask you one question?
Certainly.
I'm burdened with having been involved in this matter by accident timing that helped the former chairman about 7 years or so. So I have a history that's not necessarily helpful. When the work was done for both boards, ZBA and this board, the Nelson Pope administered across the board, we had surveys from a different surveyor that showed, I would say, what I remember, some materially different elevations, not by 100 feet, but it was going by a lot more feet. And I've tried very hard to find those old surveys and go back in the building department to find what happened. And the Squire's surveys don't appear to be available. And I just call that to your attention. It might help us resolve it. If you go to the place, which I've done numerous times, and walk around from the elevation of the back of this lot to coming down along the property line to Captain's Neck, and look at where it also goes to the south to Moreland, there are 2-3 feet different elevations involved. That may have changed. Maybe Rayner's a great firm. I have no problem with the firms or anything else.
Also, sounds.
You appear usually with Mr. Smith from Squire's
Don't
office,
say that when.
but not so often with Rayner when you
Oh,
appear. And I watch a lot of your.
No, I'm
appearances.
close
It's
pal
a
with Rayner.
historical memory, which I'll call for the record. And when you do, but the Smith surveys or something were materially different when the board was agonizing over whether or not to deal with the environmental issue. It was a 3-2 vote. I was in the minority, which you can see if you look at it all, because there were material issues with the driveway that's now being discussed, and it's being, you know, the top professional, I'm sure if the best the driveway can be made, it would be that way, but that was an issue that was discussed and was not deemed to be important enough not to give the approval on the environmental and secret to then be able to go before the applicant's board at the ZBA. So if you come up with a survey, it would be nice. If you can't, you can't. But I just call it to your attention, it is missing from the building department file, and I've gone there 4 times to try to find it, no clerk there can find it. Just for the
Alan,
record.
primarily out of absolute respect for you, and I have heard this request from you before, and just out of respect for you as a co-local resident and a gentleman and a straight shooter and someone who I admire a lot, I've gone back and tried to find those things. I simply don't know.
Okay.
I don't mean this is gonna sound like a wise guy response. I don't know what you're talking about. I've looked. I really have looked.
Okay.
Out of respect for your request, and I mean that with pure heart.
John, can I clarify? I need to clarify something.
Okay, sure.
Vincent Gordiello again. I just wanted to clarify something for you, Alan. The existing conditions that we're using on our design, though the Rayner Group are licensed surveyors, we were not the surveyors on this project. David Saskis is the surveyor.
Okay.
And that the existing conditions that we are using are taken from a survey, and it's noted right on our drawings, that Saskis did this based upon field conditions February 12th, 2019. So I just wanted to clarify that.
One, I had the wrong phrase. It was, Rayner didn't do the survey. Thank you, sir, for the correction.
But I just wanted to let you know that where that comes from.
Saskis's survey was materially different than the one we looked at, and I don't have the date of when the vote was taken, but it was back around 15 or 16. I'm just noting there's an issue in the record for me, because when I go and walk that property and look at it, I'm not very tall, right? I'm pretty good estimate of the amount of declines can be filled in and everything else. It's a material issue, and if you come up with it, John, thank you, and if you can't, you can't. I'd love to call it to the attention of everybody. It's a difference.
So just so the record's clear, I think council actually mentioned this, the sketch plan approval was, July 2nd, 2018. And, according to that, it was based upon a plan prepared by David Saskis, that's S-A-S-K-A-S. Then in that sketch plan approval notice was last put on May 9, 2017.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify because John just was talking about, you know, if we approve with conditions and at the end of the hearings, that they would be happy to comply with those conditions, but the conditions, potential conditions that I've raised a few times, including putting screening between what's now lots 1 and 2 and the third lot, which would be out to Captain's Neck, because I think the planning board is required to provide, like, you know, traditional lot layout, which would involve some screening, and although I've raised that twice, the answer twice was that they were unwilling to do that.
That's not true. That's not true. The screening shown on the area's design plan, there's a board fence shown on the area's design plan, but if the board would like as a condition, additional screening, that's something within your power to require, and you can require that as a condition. Before I forget, one thing that I will not accept as a condition, and which would be an illegal condition, I am not going back to the zoning board of appeals over my dead body. So that's not gonna be in the condition that I will accept. Thank you.
Yeah, I just also would like to respond to council's completely unsubstantiated allegations basically against me, which I am an unbiased board member and I am serving on this board, and my actual duty is to ask questions, which I do on every application, and I think it's grossly inappropriate to make statements like that.
I'm assuming that, okay.
May I have the full letter?
Sure.
Okay. I have an original on 6 copies.
Good balance.
Seven?
Has it been submitted to the planning department? Has it been submitted to the planning department?
No, it's only today. I can email it, but
Do you have a copy
I
for
know
us?
the last time,
Do you have a copy for us, Linda?
I emailed it to your office today,
Okay.
and if you want, I will give you my copy.
No, that's okay, I would never do that.
My name's Linda Margolin. Margolin, from the firm of Margolin Besender, and as this board knows, I represent several of the neighbors.
We have who they are.
I'm sorry, do you want me to respond to Mr. Bennett's questions?
I would ask that the board be the one to ask questions, and if the board has questions, Ms. Marlin will respond accordingly. And
It's
if
an
you have
appropriate question.
questions,
Just
then
saying.
ask Ms. Marlin after, that's fine.
So could I ask the board to ask Ms. Marlin what
You
her
have, it'll
clients
be up
are?
to the board, but right now, if Ms. Marlin can be allowed to make the presentation,
Okay.
she needs to
Sorry.
proceed.
As indicated in my letter, and based on my last appearance here, I continue to represent the same neighbors. Mr. Aquavella, who was a party to the lawsuit challenging the zoning board of appeals decision, and 7 neighbors who were not parties. The Fernandezes at 65 Captain's Neck Lane, the Mahoney's at 48 Captain's Neck Lane, and Minot A. Marie IV, the owner of the large parcel abutting the proposed subdivision on the other side. I don't find it's useful to scoff at my adversaries' positions. I know this board is not making decisions that a court would make. If there are legal challenges, ultimately, a court will make them. But I will say that, assuming for the moment that the Article 78 challenge to the Zoning Board of Appeals determination is upheld by the Appellate Division, and there is no change in what Mr. Bennett has described as the law. His description of what the law is a bit lacking. And why is that? Because the lane on Captain's Neck, the parcel on Captain's Neck Lane was not part of the proposed lots that were submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It was not part of the sketch plan that was submitted to this board. It was not part of the properties that were listed on the expanded environmental assessment form. Each time, and it was not Mr. Bennett's doing, but his predecessors, each time there were only 2 lots, the lots owned by 550 and 554 Hill Street. So now the question, I think, is what could the Zoning Board of Appeals determine with respect to the parcel on Captain's Neck Lane? Could they have granted a variance with respect to the setback of the driveway that it turns out was not being constructed at natural grade? I say this as a lawyer who has practiced in the zoning field just about as long as Mr. Bennett, in fact, maybe a little bit longer. I have a few years on him. The Zoning Board of Appeals cannot make a determination with respect to a parcel of land where the owner has not submitted an application to the zoning board. So clearly, the Zoning Board of Appeals could not have granted a variance for the location of this driveway, which it now appears, but was not revealed at the sketch plan stage, is not as a practical matter able to be constructed at grade. I'm not challenging the reasonableness of the engineering determination that says, we don't want a driveway that looks like this. But according to the village's code, if you want to change the grade and not build at natural grade, then you need to observe the side yard setback, which in this case is 20 feet. The current proposed revised plan that was submitted to the board moves the retaining wall, which they essentially concede is a structure, but doesn't move the driveway. And I think if you think about why it is that the village put this provision in its code, the driveway is normally just a piece of paving that goes over a natural grade. So it's not likely to disturb a neighbor, because all it's doing is raising the grade by the few inches it takes to put in, the surface underneath in the paving. But when you have 2 feet plus of cut and fill, what you wind up with is not only an area that's now lower than what it was before, but also an area that is substantially higher than what it was before. And that certainly has the ability to disturb neighbors and make the lot look rather different than it was. So if they wanted to do that, I believe it requires a variance from the zoning board of appeals with respect to the lot on Captain's Neck Lane. If they don't want to do that, then with that issue alone, they should be relocating the driveway so it isn't in the 20-foot side yard. The other issue that we still continue to believe requires a variance from the zoning board of appeals is the use of this driveway to access a different parcel where this is not a customary accessory use. The fact that it's been done in the village before, and I'm not actually aware of any subdivision in the village where the easement ran across an already developed out parcel, because that's what you're talking about. But even if it was done before, that doesn't mean it conformed with the code. Just because something got done doesn't mean it was right. And it's this board's job to figure out if in fact they can approve this or whether or not the zoning board of appeals gets to say whether it's okay. Before, when you had the sketch plan and it called for all kinds of area variances, there was no question that the applicant had to go to the zoning board of appeals and get those variances. So they got 100% street frontage variance for 2 of these lots. But they didn't get any variances with respect to the Captain's Neck Lane lot. And I don't think that could possibly be disputed. It doesn't matter what the appellate court does with the challenge to the Article 78. The rest of the arguments about what happened in court and whether res judicata applies to an Article 78, so on and so forth, they really are beside the point. No one can argue that the zoning board of appeals granted any variance with respect to the Captain's Neck Lane lot. So I've appended to my letter of today the village code definitions and other sections that I think compel the conclusion that I'm urging on this board. We have an accessory structure. I don't believe it's a customary accessory structure, but that is something we've already just talked about before. It is, it does not have an out because it's not excluded as a driveway at a natural grade. It's not at the natural grade, and I don't think there's any question about that. And even though there's another section that says an access driveway may be located within a required yard, if I was arguing for the other side, I would say, well, there are 2 conflicting provisions in the zoning code. You have to get the zoning board of appeals to make an interpretation. I don't think they're conflicting. I think it's pretty clear you can't have this without a setback because it is a structure. But if I went the other way, I'd still be sending it back to the ZBA for an interpretation. So, to finish up, I don't believe that the board is in a position to approve this subdivision as it states.
Good evening, board member, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jeff Bragman. I represent Eric Ruttenberg. I'm going to be quick. I'm going to ask to reserve my time. We got new materials in today dealing with drainage and other issues. Actually, we got in 2 sets of new drainage plans. And I need time as you do to review it and prefer to speak to you after you've had a chance to review it and I'll have as well. I did want to just say, in reference to Mr. Bennett's recitation of the chronology of the case, that he omitted the fact that the applicant over the years adjourned the case. I believe, in doing this from memory, I believe it was for a period of 4 years that he adjourned the case. We didn't include that in his chronology. But I look forward to talking to you at the next board meeting after we're all had a chance to review the documents. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who wants to speak?
Have they finished?
No one else from the public?
I just wanted to add one thing in response to Ms. Marvin. This is from the findings and decisions of the zoning board of appeals. On the first page, lot 3 will gain access to Captain's Neck Lane via a 25-foot wide access easement along the southerly side of the adjoining property located at 62 Captain's Neck Lane, owned by an affiliate of the applicant. It's an absolute consent, all necessary, is the applicant here and now. That may be an argument if somebody came in and was trying to get some sort of variance on our property that I own, and said, what the hell are you doing? But he's an affiliate of the applicant, it was all disclosed, really grasping at straws. So again, what I would ask you to do is to close this hearing for written submission only. We have nothing else to submit. We stand ready, willing, and able, to the extent that there are reasonable conditions imposed as part of the conditional final approval, which is where this application should go right now, if they're reasonable, to take care of them. Nelson Pope, the board drafts some reasonable conditions. We can certainly submit that, and that's the way these things are handled. We don't go on and on ad infinitum until in a process like this. So again, my respectful request is that you close the hearing for written submission and establish a date for a vote on a final conditional approval.
I hate to disappoint you, John, but it's been too much, too fast, too late, and I want to give Scott time to review it, just for everyone's comfort. I think it'll go a long way for the end result, and so I'd like to move that we leave this public hearing open until the April 17th meeting of 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I do just have a question, two questions. In terms of that, and I recognize that everybody who's submitted something in writing has spent a lot of time preparing it, and the board members want to take sufficient time to review it. There were documents received for various reasons, Friday, today. Perhaps if there was a deadline set for written submissions, which would then allow Ms. Eisman's firm, board members, and selfishly me, the opportunity to review it, if there could be a deadline set. And the other thing is, and I would just, if I could remind council, or everyone, if you would be so kind, when you're submitting the documents, please, to the building department if you would. Certainly I'd appreciate a copy, the board, that's fine, but some have been going direct to the chair, rather they go through the building department, and then, I think, I'm looking to Mr. Wallach for this, hard copies could then be dropped to the village hall, whatever your procedure is, if it's a hard copy, that's fine, because I think something came in today, admittedly it came in at 2 o'clock, so I don't think a hard copy could have been delivered if you wanted to, but if you'd be so kind.
We
So-
deliver copies to the board, to Ms. Eisen, to you, to our adversaries.
Understood.
Same day.
Just asking that, but the key is the building department, so if that's,
No,
I think it's the building department. So if perhaps a date could be set for submissions, that might help all involved.
Well, is 2 weeks enough? So if I said by April 3rd, that's a Monday? And you said nothing, you're done,
I'm not gonna submit
right?
anything unless there's something out of some
Left.
strange
Okay.
left field.
Then I think April 3rd is good, and that'll give us 2 weeks to review everything and deal with that on the 17th.
Thank you.
So then,
Again, over my objection, but thank you.
so if there's a motion for April 3rd for submissions, is there a motion for that?
Yes, there is a motion.
And second? All in favor?
Aye.
And then to answer your question, we do require things to be dropped off at the building department in hard copy, 7 copies and a digital copy as well. That can be sent to building inspector at southamptonvillage.org. You can copy council, myself, Ms. Eisen.
Myself, if I can, if that's a deadline for NPV to submit something, it makes it impossible to respond to them.
No, we don't have go on
That's-
ad
that's
infinitum.
for- if I can just, Mr. Bennett, that's for either Mr. Bennett or for you.
Okay.
But the consultant's gonna then need the time to
Right.
review and respond.
That's fine.
So that's for your submission.
This has nothing to do with public, we have a little housekeeping, and we have to formally do it the third reading on record. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
With that, is there any other business before the board?
There's an item on the agenda for the February 6th minutes that comes from the separate committee to review.
I have received
You
all,
have.
right.
All right, then I trust Alan with minutes, so, I'd like to move to the accept the February 2nd, 2016 minutes.
February 6th.
February 6th, sorry. All in favor? Great.
As long as I can, no.
I think that was all that.
I'd like to move to close the meeting. All in favor?